Well, howdy there, Internet people. It's Bo again. And today we are going to be talking with Kim Kelly, one of the interesting people we're going to have on the channel. And she has some news for us. Kim, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hello, thanks so much for having me. It's great to meet you guys. My name's Kim. I live in South Philadelphia. I'm from the middle of nowhere, New Jersey. Let's see, I'm a freelance or independent labor reporter, however you want to say that. I used to be the heavy metal editor at Vice up until 2019 when I got laid off. And by then, my interest had shifted so much through the course of unionizing at Vice that I was like, you know what? Maybe I'll just jump into this whole other world and see how that works out. And so far, so good. I've been reporting on all kinds of strikes and organizing campaigns, and I have a book coming out in April, and pre-orders go live for that on Thursday. You can find more about that on my Twitter or my Patreon, however you say that. But yeah, I'm a little. Obviously, this past year I haven't really been anywhere, but I spent a lot of time in Alabama and literally only Alabama since February. And I've been focusing my reporting work on all kinds of interesting things that are happening there. And I'm excited to tell you guys all about it.
Okay, so her Twitter handle is at Grim Kim, right?
Yeah, college radio DJ name that will never die.
Nice. And and then you have what's the name of the book?
It's called Fight Like Hell: The Untold History of American Labor. So you can guess what it's about.
Nice. Okay. So, what were you doing in Alabama?
Well, I first went down there in February because this digital media outlet, More Perfect Union, had reached out to me and said, we noticed that there's this Amazon warehouse full of workers who are trying to organize and trying to unionize down there. And we think that's going to be kind of interesting. Do you want to go down there and do some video content for us? And at first I was like, I don't know about all that because I'm not really a video guy, or at least up until that point, hadn't been a video guy. I'm a writer. But I thought it was a really important story. And I was like, you know what? Screw it. Let's go see what's going on. So I went down there for about a month, 2 weeks, a while. I was down there for a while. And I think I was probably one of the first, if not the first, media people down there. And so I had a lot of time to get to know folks who are organizing, get to know the workers, get to know the union people, and get really invested. And I ended up going back again for another couple of weeks later in that campaign when things were heating up. And then once their election had concluded and it became pretty apparent that they're going to need to appeal and rerun it because Amazon's union busting campaign was, well, if you've got the richest guy in the world at the helm, you can get away with a lot of dirty, which they did. So I went back down there a third time because they're having kind of a campaign closing rally, and I wanted to see my friends. And while I was there, I knew kind of in the back of my head that there was a coal miner strike happening about 16 miles outside of Bessemer in Brookwood in a more rural area. And my friend Chris, who was down there documenting the Amazon stuff from the jump, we were like, oh, let's go out there. Let's get some Krispy Kremes. Let's bring some donuts out and go say hi and just support the workers on the line. And we went out there and got to know some folks there. And I was so interested in what was going on that I ended up getting even more invested. And I've been back there two more times since just to report on what's happening and work on this mini documentary series on it for the Real News. And I'm just, man, I'm all in. Like I text a bunch of them. We have like a group chat. Like I'm, it's a big part of my life at this point. And yeah, it's been a while. It is funny because literally Alabama is the only other place I've gone besides my South Philly neighborhood since like early 2020. And I'm not. I'm hoping I get to go back soon. It gets really hot there though, so we'll see. I'm just hoping if everything wraps up and they win a good contract and everyone's good. But if I have to go down there and sweat my off again, I will happily do it.
All right. And so tell us about the situation at the mine because our viewers are familiar with it. We covered it a little bit, and I actually was trying to get up there to their fundraiser and couldn't, so we had to do everything online. But so they're probably very curious about what's going on and what's happening next.
Right. So You already know the basics. Since April 1st, 1,100 coal miners at Warrior Met Coal in Brookwood, Alabama, have been out on strike, an unfair labor practices strike, basically because the company was not bargaining in good faith. They're working on a new contract because their previous contract, which was terrible, which they only accepted because the mine had gone into bankruptcy right before Warrior Met came in, and they were kind of presented with this, devil's bargain of like, look, here's the contract we're going to offer you. Once we get on our feet and make some profits and get established, we'll take care of you. And they took it, and 5 years later, that is not what's happening. So these folks have been on strike for a very long time now. I think it's, let's see, April, May, June. We're in the middle of July, 3.5 months. 3.5 months. And it's been getting pretty ugly. There hasn't been a ton of mainstream media coverage of it. Lord knows I've been trying. It's kind of become my personal crusade in a way to get people to pay attention to this strike. But it's been difficult. And these folks are kind of, you're never on your own in the labor movement. Labor leaders and rank and file folks from across the country and in the community have been pitching in and sending in donations and coming up to rallies. They've built a really robust, really mutual aid network, specifically the auxiliary, which is primarily the spouses and retired members, have built up a really formidable strike pantry, and they've been feeding people and getting school supplies for kids and taking care of pregnant people. It's been really beautiful. But the company has seen this, and a lot of folks down there, the way that they describe it is, Warrior Met is trying to starve us out. They brought in scabs. They have management and bosses working inside the mines, which I'm sure has been a rude awakening for them. They have engaged private armed security to patrol the picket lines and keep an eye on things. They're flying drones over the picket lines. And the most sobering and really horrifying aspect of the company's participation, their attitude towards the strikers, has been this really, really awful uptick in violence, and specifically in vehicular attacks. I think we are now up to four instances of cars and trucks being driven into the picket lines and, hitting people or hitting burn barrels that fly into people. And folks have been sent to the hospital. The most recent incident, a coal miner's wife was hit and she was injured. And the thing about that kills me is that her husband, about a few weeks ago, he was hit too and went to he had to go to the hospital for a torn meniscus. So like this entire family is hurting, and there's a lot of these families, and it's been the vehicular attack part has been hard for me, just as someone who's invested and who cares about these folks, and also as someone who was at Charlottesville's Unite the Right rally in 2017 and barely made it out alive. Just seeing this tactic that has been embraced by fascists, seeing it used pretty much with impunity by these company bosses and company employees against these striking workers. It sends a chill down your spine. And I don't know how. I worry about what's going to happen, because these picket lines, it's not, there's 1,100 workers, that's a lot of people, but the company earlier on, they acquired an injunction from the court that restricted the amount of people that are allowed out on the line. At first it was 6 and they got it up to 10. That's still not very many. And the line itself, it's not, one of those big continuous like signs up triumphant looking picket line.
Okay, and we are back after a short technical interruption. For once, it wasn't my internet out in the boonies that crashed, but we are back right now. So you were at the part where you were telling us what the line looks like and how it may not be what we are picturing.
Right. So when you hear the words picket line, there's this idea of a literal line of people walking around in a circle holding up signs in front of a business or some kind of other establishment, right? That's not what it looks like in Brookwood at the Warrior Met strike. The Warrior Met coal mine is very big. There's multiple entrances. There's not a lot of through traffic, not people will drive by and see you on the line, but it's not quite the same thing as what you might be used to seeing in a town or a bigger city. There are 12 different outposts that are scattered around the outside of the mine, covering all the entrances. And because there's a court injunction, thanks to the company, there aren't, big groups of people out there. There could be, because there's 1,100 people on strike, but because of this injunction, there are only legally allowed to be 11 people on, or no, 10 people on the line in each, in each section. And actually, I should. That might not even be. Actually, you're editing this stuff, right?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Well, definitely.
Okay. So I'm just thinking about it as like, this is, like, I'm just talking to you, but I'm just thinking, like, there's an injunction that says you can only have 10 people on the line. And I'm thinking back to who, because I visited a bunch of these different little stations, and there's never 10 people on them. So maybe it is 10 people total for all of those different outposts, which is even more fucked up than I thought. Man, God, where am I the worst? You can even keep that in, me just like thinking through this. But yeah, I mean, it makes sense. And a lot of folks have had their spouses and their families come out to support, because I don't think they're technically fall under the injunction because they're not employees, they're not part of the union. But the more that happens, and one of the women I talked to a lot, Hayden, she was telling me that they've had t-ball games out there, people bringing the kids out and having families there, and it's really nice atmosphere. I've been down there a few times and brought treats and talked to the guys, the people sitting there. But I already mentioned the vehicular attacks, but just the contrasting that environment and that scene of like kids playing t-ball and coming out to see their dads and their moms in the picket line, with the idea of these truck attacks. Like, there's kids out there, they're the company has really shown no interest in recognizing that it's not just the strikers who they're attacking, it's potentially their families as well. Like, as I said, a person's wife was just hit. She's not in the union, she doesn't work at Warrior Met, but she was targeted by association, and she's paid the price for supporting her husband, supporting her her union family. So it's just pretty wild. When you don't have cell phone service and these things are happening, that can be pretty scary. Like, if my person was on strike and they're out on the picket line and I knew this was going on, I would be sitting at home terrified, just hoping that they make it home safe, which is something that, if you're married to a coal miner, that's a feeling you're already accustomed to, but this is a whole other level.
Right. Right. And I've seen some of the incidents that have been caught on film. And it isn't, when you're watching something like this, they can always frame it, well, this was an accident, this wasn't. Uh, it seems really hard to do that in these cases.
Yeah, it's literally like you can't turn it up. Like, a big black pickup truck driving into a line of people, driving off of a road, turning off of the road specifically to drive into these people, and when they feel the impact and see a person in front of the windshield, continuing to drive. I don't think you can spin that, you
Right.
know.
It's going to be real hard because eventually all of this stuff's going to end up in court. And
Oh yeah.
the the defense is going to have a hard time with that one, I think.
Right.
Um,
And I don't think Alabama has one of those laws about I don't know the mechanics of it, but there's a bunch. We know this. There's a bunch of laws that have been introduced and maybe even passed across the country post 2017 that basically allow people to drive into protesters and say that that's fine legally. You can do that. You can just try to murder people. I guess America. I don't think Alabama has one of those on the books, but that's something I've been hearing from the folks there. Like, the response to their concern over these attacks is, oh, well, y'all are in the road. Get out of the way. You shouldn't be out there. Like, yeah, I don't think that warrants, you running over someone's wife. I don't know. Maybe that's just me.
that's what you get. Yankee liberal. Okay. No.
A damn Yankee. I've learned. I've been spent a lot of time in Alabama. I'm from Jersey, man. I get it.
Uh, okay. So what's happening next? And there's some trips going on and stuff like that. Tell us about that.
Yes, it's super exciting. They I guess it was maybe a trial balloon. A handful of miners, I think it was about 14 miners from Brookwood and then local UMWA officials. They came up, it was only a few weeks ago, I think later in June, they came up to New York City and they visited these three locations for these three different venture capital funds, chief among them BlackRock, who who support Warrior Met, who fund Warrior Met, who have allowed Warrior Met to pay their executives millions of dollars while these folks are working 6 hours a day, 6 days a week, 12 hours a day underground for like $22 an hour. So they went up there and they had, a little protest. It got kind of rained out. It was really cold. It was weird for June in New York. But they had local union members come out and rally with them. It was really cool to see. And now, later in July, on the 28th to be exact, they're coming back. They're coming back to Black Rock. And this time they're bringing their families. They're bringing a whole lot of their friends. I can say that I chat with the UMWA press guy pretty often about all this stuff. It sounds like they've got at least 6 buses chartered full of striking miners and their families who are coming up to New York City to show up in front of Black Rock and be like, look, here's who you're hurting. Here's what you're doing. Here's what you're supporting. We're not going to lie here and take this. They're asking for folks in New York and surrounding areas in the union world and just people who support them in general to come out and show their support. It should be a pretty big event. Like, I'm going up there again. I'm really excited, especially because this time the wives are coming. And, I'm a little biased, I guess, but they have just been so incredible in the support networks they've built and the mutual aid sort of effort they put together, the amount of work they put into getting the strike out there. Hayden Wright, she's my girl. She's been doing tons of interviews. She's been kind of prodding her husband into doing interviews, really just getting the word out. And having those women up there, I think is going to just ramp things up to like a whole new level. There is this long history of women, well, lots of people, of course, but women specifically in the coal mining world who have shown up and shown out for the striking miners. Even if they weren't working the mines themselves, they and their families were so closely tied to it that it was their fight too. This particular episode makes me think of like in 1983, when we had the Great Arizona Copper Strike, and the Women's Auxiliary there was super active. Those women went on a speaking tour across the country to bring attention to their plight, to what their bosses were doing, to what their folks were fighting for. And they went to New York, and they went after Wall Street too. And so these women from Brookwood, Alabama, they're following in those footsteps. They're following in the footsteps of Mother Jones, who they love to invoke. They're really bringing the fight to the front doors of these venture capitalists who are profiting off of their labor. And I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I love about being down here. Like you keep saying that, they've built these mutual aid networks, and they have, and they exist. And very, very few of them would ever use that terminology, like it's just the way it is. And then when it swings into action, you have, especially, leftists from urban areas who see it and they're like, y'all built this great network. Like, nah, we all just went to high school together. Yeah,
and there's those family ties and those church ties, and that there's nobody else around within 5 miles, so we're friends kind of ties.
Right.
Like that's kind of place I grew up too. Man, they wouldn't call it mutual aid, but it is. I will say, just personally, it has been very surreal and very funny to hear some of these older heads, like the older dudes, like yelling about hating socialism and all that, communism. But then they go to their, they pick up their strike check and they pick up their free groceries at their union rally, while they're on strike for their labor union, but they hate socialism. But like, do they hate socialism, or do they hate what someone told them socialism is? And I think, asking questions.
That's a conversation I have a lot when people are like, I these leftists, and I'm like, dude, you just left the co-op and you're heading to the union meeting, whether you realize it or not. You actually are a leftist.
Yeah, like we all hate the government, we all hate the boss. That you're halfway there.
Yeah. So, what can people do to help?
Right. So speaking of the strike pantry, the mutual aid effort, they do collect donations for that. There's Hayden Wright at Hayden Wright on Twitter. She's the mastermind. she obviously tons of people are involved and are, it's definitely a community effort, but she's really good at social media and she's been kind of marshaling the effort online. You can find info on how to donate on her Twitter. And then the UMWA has set up an official strike fund that, folks can donate there, and that goes into to keep funding the strike, those strike checks. And then these folks, they're not getting rich off of these checks. It's like, I think about $650 every 2 weeks, assuming that you put in your time in the picket line. And I think about 80%, if not more, of the workers here are parents. And and school's coming up, and there's definitely an economic need there. So if you have the ability to donate, or just have the ability to signal boost and share that link around so people who do have the ability to donate can chip in, it'll go a long way. Because, man, last time I was down there, the ladies were showing me around their hall, like their storeroom for all the donations, all the things they'd purchased for the strike pantry. And they had a whole section devoted to school supplies because they're already planning for September if they need to. They told me that they're already, kind of putting together plans to do a toy drive for Christmas. Like, they expect this to be a very long haul. They're hoping it won't be, because these folks just want to go back to work and make their money and live their lives. Being on strike isn't a walk in the park, especially if, most media in the world and the country isn't paying attention. Even the people that you would hope or expect. Like, I will tell you, this is what kind of kills me. I know for a fact that a lot of these folks are conservative, or they consider themselves to be conservative. They're on the right side, on the right politically, and they watch Fox News, they watch Tucker Carlson and all that. One of my girls sends me Sean Hannity videos all the time, bless her. And this is exactly the kind of story I mean, Tucker Carlson hopefully rots in hell as soon as possible, but this story of like these blue collar American working men and women going up against these Wall Street elites, that's exactly the kind of thing that he and his fan base thrive on. But they're union, and that's too much of a commie pinko thing for them to even look at. So it's completely ignored them, even though, like, and all these Republican politicians who love to trot out coal miners for photo ops and talk about how they're going to save their industry, they're not showing up. They're not even sending tweets. They're not sending money. They're not doing a damn thing to help these people, a lot of whom voted for them. And it's like, my heart really goes out to them, because they're kind of backed in a corner. And it's interesting to be a labor reporter and to go to a place like this and kind of have to recalibrate the way that I understand and view like the culture and like the political landscape, because it's I definitely haven't been around that many Trump supporters since last time I went to my grandma's for Christmas. So it's been an adjustment, but you know, these folks are still hurting, and I think they deserve our help.
Right. And yeah, and that's what it is. It's a very common theme on my channel, because it boils down to a lot of rural people. When it comes to economic policies, they are left, but they're socially conservative, and the right wing in the United States drags out, the symbol of the Bible and the flag, and it motivates them, and it drives them, and they end up voting against their own economic interest. But in this case, I haven't seen. This is also an example of when the Democratic Party could, in theory, reach out, show up, give some support, and you don't see that either.
I will say I did hear an anecdote from someone who was actually involved in Strike Fest. So he was pretty involved in all this. He told me that someone from Bernie Sanders' orbit had reached out and said, the senator wants to send some pizza. Can he send something to support? And it sounds like they reached out to one of the local union officials, and the guy was like, "Oh, we don't want that down here. Like, we don't want Bernie to send us
Oh
anything."
man.
And it's like, I get it conceptually, but like, bro, you really need all the help you can get, my guy. Like, it is like, it's and then none of the other Democrats even tried. And it's like, maybe they're afraid because it's, fossil fuel related. Maybe they're afraid they wouldn't be welcome. Though I will say, more locally, the Alabama Democrats have, they've they've collected a whole lot of donations and donated a ton of stuff to the strike pantry. So on a more local level, I think there's those divisions, partisan divisions or whatever, are a little more fluid. But yeah, you're not going to get a congressional delegation to Brookwood, even though it's only 16 miles outside of Bessemer. And like half of Congress showed up there when Amazon was organizing. So it's like, man, there's a golden opportunity here to show like a bunch of people who think you suck that you actually care about them. But as per usual, the Democrats are whiffing it.
Right, right. In this regard, they definitely are, and it's sad, but it is what it is. So your book is on pre-order now, you said?
The link comes out on Thursday and I'm talking to you on Wednesday. So I can send it to you. I'm gonna put it all over the internet. It's gonna but I guess I can say it'll be out on Simon and Schuster's One Signal imprint on April 26, 2022. So just in time for May Day. Yeah. I'm still writing the damn thing, but now there's a little more pressure.
Right. So yeah, definitely send it because we're gonna have to do the editing on this one. So
Oh, that's right. Sick.
it'll be live. It'll be live.
Oh,
It'll be good.
maybe I should re-say that in a way that it's that. That's probably fine.
Yeah, it'll be fine. Don't worry about it. It's a very informal channel. There, it's all right.
Yeah, I've got my I gotta make sure I got my ring light. I gotta make sure I have my sound bites ready. Like, I don't know, man. I spent half my life on Zoom trying to talk to people for the past year. But yeah, this is much more fun than having to explain what a union is or like why we should actually care about people even if they voted for something. Oh man, I've gotten some of the wildest like commentary because I've been doing all this work in Alabama, and there's so many conceptions about the Deep South and about Alabama, and like sure some of them are true. I'm not the Alabama whisperer, but I've learned a lot being there, and about the history and about the folks who are there now, and the folks who are there now trying to make things better for themselves and their communities and for everyone. Like you write off the South, you write off rural areas at your peril, you know?
Right. And it happens. There's so many misconceptions and stereotypes about this kind of stuff. And then people have like anecdotal things, over the last 2 months or so, I've had 3 or 4 people. They're like, when I was traveling in the South, they invited me to go to this organization, this meeting. And I'm like, okay. And they're assuming that it's the Klan. And I'm like, yeah,
oh, no.
They were probably inviting you to a church group. If they were inviting you to the Klan, that says a whole lot about you because I've lived down here a long time and nobody's ever offered to take me.
Oh man, it's wild. Like I've traveled a whole bunch because I used to tour with heavy metal bands, so I've kind of been everywhere in the country. And I used to tour specifically with Southern heavy metal bands, so I got kind of a crash course in getting rid of some of those liberal Yankee ideas I might have had when I was younger. And I just wish more people could have that experience. If not touring with a heavy metal band, but like paying attention to other parts of the country that maybe you're not as familiar with and being like, oh, they have people there.
Right.
Amazing. Right. Who knew?
Right. So yeah. Okay. So can you think of anything else? Anything that anybody needs to know, information that they need to have?
I mentioned Hayden's Twitter. There've been the Valley Labor Report. They're great. They're based in Alabama. Those guys have been on top of the strike since the beginning. They planned that Alabama Strike Fest that I know you took part in, and your wonderful reader or watchers, viewers, contributed a lot of support too. That was great. They're really, really great. They deserve a ton of support for doing what they do, where they do it, and amplifying these worker struggles in the Deep South. And they're a talk radio show, so they're always fun to listen to. But yeah, keep an eye out for them and for their coverage. UMWA is, they're not as much fun, maybe message-wise, as like me or Valley Labor Report, but they've got a lot of good info too. Yeah, it's funny how social media has become such a big informational aspects of this strike. I mean, we've seen that happening a lot over the past few years, obviously, but this is more of a Facebook crowd, but Twitter is where all the action is in terms of people paying attention. And I'm in a bunch of the miners' Facebook groups, and it's like a whole other world. But Twitter is a good place to keep an eye on the developments, I would say.
Yeah, it's one of those. Twitter is definitely a mixed bag because you can get information so much faster, but there's a lot of other stuff that you have to sort through.
Dude, I will say coal miner Facebook is a trip. there's that's the thing. Like I'm a reporter and stuff, but I'm also very biased and very sympathetic. And like there's a bunch of stuff that I've seen that I could maybe report on. These are coal miners. They're in the UMWA. There's a long history of fighting back against bullshit. And they're not taking any of this lying down. But they're not driving trucks into anybody either. So, we'll just leave it at that.
Right. That tends to be how it works. It's normally defensive.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Just, be smart. Keep some things off Twitter, I guess.
Right.
Good rule of thumb, like for life, generally. Just never tweet. But yeah, so I guess, as I say that, I tweet vociferously, and I'm going to keep following this. I should be focusing on my book, but I'm doing that, but also following the strike because I'm so invested, and this is like my treat, like doing all this writing stuff, and then like, oh, what's going on with the strike? What can I put out there? This is like my fun thing. So yeah, keep an eye on what's happening. Pay attention, have a little empathy. I feel like once they get back to work and get their contract set, finally, then maybe we can tell them that coal isn't great. You can stop coming into my mentions and telling me the coal is bad. I know. It's not.
Right?
You don't need to tell me. It's so weird. Some of the quote tweets I've gotten are like, oh, well, why are we supporting coal miners? They're destroying the planet. Like, yeah, these specific people they're specifically signed up to destroy the planet. That's what they want to do for themselves and their kids. They're not just taking the only decent job within a 50-mile radius that 3 generations of their family was part of that offers them a union and a decent living. No, they want to set the world on fire specifically. Out of here,
Yeah.
I hope I can say swear words on here because I've said a bunch.
I think Carrie probably going to clean that up. Like, I think when it gets edited, some of it will probably be bleeped out, or it'll just be dead air. I don't know how it's going to work. We'll figure that out.
I was trying not to, but I feel animated about these things.
It's fine. It's fine. You're not offending me or anybody really. So
family friendly show.
Yeah.
All right. I think that's all I got. Keep an eye out, and one day longer, one day stronger.
All right. Okay, everybody. So that's the show. It's just a thought. Y'all have a good day.